and I wanted to come to you tonight. We've had a little bit of technical difficulties, and it's partially because we're using some software that we don't normally use for our Facebook Live tonight. And it's a big part because we wanted to have a guest on tonight. We certainly wanted to have a distinguished individual that has some inner knowledge in the circumstances that are going on in the legislature, as well as the executive orders we're seeing from our governor that keep. And we wanted to get him on tonight specifically to talk about the executive order or the replacement of the executive order and the going forward plan that was presented by the governor tonight. And I wanted to bring in the Speaker of the House, Ron Ryckman, into the group and just ask some questions that have been submitted to me to ask the speaker. And I'm going to bring him into our conversation here tonight, and we're going to ask him some questions. So hopefully this is going to work out. All right. Can you see me okay?
I can see it. Can you hear me? You can see me?
I can hear you and see you great. Thanks for joining. Thanks for joining us tonight. And it's been a kind of a crazy night. We've been waiting on bated breath, waiting for this executive order to come out, and with a grandiose fashion, it seems that the governor graced us tonight with her presence and unleashed this plan upon us. And it seems like it was really done in a lot of secrecy. There wasn't a lot of talk and a lot of conversation that was happening out there, but that's what it seemed like to the grassroots, at least. But I don't know if you probably haven't a ton of time to kind of look through the plan. I know I've kind of glanced through it some and really picked out a few things I want to talk about tonight. But any initial thoughts on this particular thing?
Yeah, David, you're right. There wasn't a lot of input. There wasn't any input from your House leadership. We've offered numerous times, to take some of the ideas we hear from folks like yourself and other business owners. We have a lot of constituents across the state who had a lot of good ideas. We wanted to share those with the governor as she opens up this state, as we know has to happen. We were not included in those discussions. And I, along with the rest of Kansans at 6:30, listened to her plan for the first time and had a little bit of time to review it. And I again appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about it and hear some of your questions and some of your thoughts. My first one is even how she declares a second disaster. And you might want to get that a little later. That's my initial thought, is how do we even get past May 1st? And I'm sure we'll probably have a chance to talk about it later. That was my kind of initial thought. The second one, it seemed very confusing. And it wasn't very optimistic. I mean, Kansans, you give us a goal and we can do it. What are our metrics? What are our measurements? If I'm a small business and I want to open that plan and I couldn't, that plan didn't tell me how. What could I do? We're self-starters. We want to make sure that we want to, get up every day and pull ourselves up and go to work. And then for the folks that can't do that, who never in their life have thought about relying on government assistance, they can't get unemployment because the system's crashed. So tonight, we were very hopeful that the governor would have a plan that was more optimistic, one that allowed Kansans to get back to work, or at least take self-responsibility. But we didn't see that. But we'll definitely get back tomorrow and later tonight to call the few numbers we have of our staff to see how we can get this thing going.
Well, yeah, given the fact that the Governor Kelly kept these plans virtually a secret to the business owners across the state, obviously they've got to make plans. They're running a business. And what are some of your thoughts on how they should proceed, given the fact that many of them have laid off their employees? In some cases, those employees are now making more in unemployment, if they're actually receiving it, than what they would be being paid at work. I mean, some of these businesses might have to now go out and find some new employees, and to be kind of keeping this a secret and just unleashing it on them just a day or before this new order goes into effect, or I know she's saying May 4th, whatever. I've been going by the assumption it was May 1st all along, and we can get into that as well. But what are these businesses? What are they? What are you going to say to them?
Well, a lot of it is, keep calling the phone numbers to help your employees get through the system. But you're right. There's a perverse, incentive right now for a lot of folks when you can get your normal unemployment from the state plus the additional money from the federal government. But sometimes equates to equivalent of $50,000 if you can get it. There's a lot of folks that would that have jobs that can come back to work that have been deemed safe, where their employers are open, but they have an incentive to sit home, and that's not how Kansas was built. And so we have to find a way to, and that's part of working with our partners in the federal government to rein that in a little bit. And so people have the incentive to go out and work when they can. But we have to continue the advocacy, the social media, the calls to the governor, to call to people like myself to continue to get this relaxed state so we can get back to work. It's very important. I mean, you guys saw the revenue numbers and come from the state, and we put out a statement and continue to say our plan cannot be just to get another federal bailout. Our plan has to be how we can open up safely and get businesses to open. And just because you're not deemed essential by a bureaucrat doesn't mean you're not essential to that employee, to that business owner. And so what can you do safely to reopen and, allow people to have some self-responsibility and kind of figure out what they want to do and especially if they want to work.
Absolutely. Well, I know there's a lot of confusion that's out there, and we talked about that May 1st date, and certainly the authority that the Governor Kelly has. Obviously May 1st is what I keep reading as far as what the legislature authorized, but where does her authority end, and why is it still she's able to make these orders, or perceive that she should be able to?
That's a great question. We're definitely in uncharted territory inside our law books. Our law clearly states that the governor can declare a disaster for 15 days. It can be extended by a declaration, extended by a resolution by the full House and Senate, or it can be extended by 30 days by the State Finance Council, which is a few of us leaders, including leaders in the House and Senate and the governor. Her time frame on that ran out. The declaration that she made initially, I think on March 12th, on the 19th, the full body, every single member of the House and Senate, Democrat and Republican, voted to extend it to May 1st, and that's it. She went to court. It took away the ability for the LCC, or the group that meets that can represent the legislature, could revoke her orders and also extend if necessary. But since she basically resolved that in court, there wasn't a way to even have this extension. And so what she came up with is just to start a brand new disaster declaration. And there's not a place in our statute book that allows for that. And so it's very, I would say, not on good legal footing that this second disaster has been declared. And I'm sure our courts will have to figure it out.
Yeah, and I was just about to ask you, what oversight does the legislature have at this point over Governor Kelly's recent actions? And since the Kansas Supreme Court's decision to essentially neuter the LCC, or the Legislative Coordinating Council, is there anything that the legislature can do?
Well, besides the advocacy and things we're doing, obviously the question's out there, do you come back in the session? And we've definitely reviewed that and looked at it. But the main thing we have to do is change the statute. And a statute requires a governor's signature. Okay? By declaration, which doesn't declare a governor's signature, it says 63 votes in the House and 21 in the Senate. We can end a disaster. We can end an executive order. But there's nothing that stops her from the very next day reissuing the exact same disaster or issuing the exact same executive order. And so if we're there and we happen to change the statute, she could wait about 10 to 15 days before she decides to sign that. If that statute would bring in some of her authority. And so I firmly believe the best way this would happen now is continue the advocacy, the public pressure. I'm not a guy who normally wants anybody to go to court, but you saw how we had to do that. Our churches had to do that. We went to a federal court, and the federal court said, no, you cannot throw people in jail for going to church. Not in Kansas, you can't. And he's a federal judge, and that was settled, and Governor Kelly removed that and issued a new order finally. And so, again, there's still discussion if we want to come back. But if we do find the 63 votes, which I don't think would be an issue, in the 21 in the Senate, for a resolution which doesn't require signature, she can just issue a new one the very next day, and we can play that game with her. And eventually we have a hard deadline of sine die, which is coming up on the 21st of March. And so we're still weighing all those options, and your leadership in the House continue to talk about this 2 or 3 times a day as we weigh the benefits that are coming back and the ones of just continuing the pressure and letting our courts help us out.
Obviously I work at the grassroots quite a bit, and you're right. I hear it all the time about why doesn't the legislature come back to fix the executive order power and pass some law that restricts her a little further in what she can, what she can't do. And then I hear, is it because of the possible fact that the votes are there to get Medicaid expansion? Now, did you want to comment on that somewhat?
Sure. You have 41 votes for guaranteed in the House with Democrats that want Medicaid expansion, regardless of what it looks like. And then of the 84 Republicans, that just leaves a small segment that can join the 41 and get at least 63 votes for expansion. I don't know if this is the time that they'd push for that. I think they've signaled they would, but it would be a risk with this not knowing what the Senate may or may not do. If they send over something on a procedure motion, that could just be up down with the number of members in the body, and we'd have to have 63 of the right folks there. But there's other things that we would have to look at and consider. That is, people bring it up. It is a consideration. I think it'd be very difficult on a straight trying to get less than 63 people that would approve that if it were to come over. And there's definitely 21 votes in the Senate for it as well.
Okay. Well, I would hope that we would have at least 64 votes that are pro-life in the House. I can't speak to the exact number, but the fact that Medicaid expansion is an avenue to get state-sponsored abortion and that type of thing. Certainly that angle is one way to take. But I know I saw it last year. I obviously saw that the gut and go that happened last year to get it through the House, and I know it is a concern. But with the shortfalls in the budget and the federal funding questions that are coming down the line, isn't the legislature going to have to come back to at least address some of the budget issues this year?
Well, there is the question. Again, the governor's plan seems to be, let's see what the federal handout looks like. And that's going to take a little time to figure out. Sure. We will see what it looks like when we do get our economy up and running again. The estimates that came in kind of assumes that we have a normal economy back in January. The way things are going right now, I don't see that. And also, we're not inside the agencies to see exactly where the cuts could be. So we're probably looking to see what the federal government does, and also what Governor Kelly is going to recommend. She's the one in charge of agencies. Again, we were going to be spending more money than we're bringing in before this. We were fortunate to have about $1 billion reserve before this thing started. That money was running out without this. And now that we lost $1.2 billion in about 14 months, January 1st is when we start our new fiscal year. And in Kansas, if you're projected to be below zero, which by July 1st of 2021, we're projected to be over $600 million below zero, the governor can immediately start allotting or cutting wherever she like. And so that's always an option for us. But for us to try to take that kind of a swing at a budget in a couple of weeks time frame, or even 3 or 4 days, with 90% of our spendings in K through 12 and social services and capers. And so it's going to be a lift. And I think a lot of us are prepared to do it, but we want to have to see what the governor's proposal will be, especially when it comes to if you have to do things with higher education or K-12 or social services. There's a lot of programs out there. Some are actually core functions of government. Does she want to take another look at not making a capers payment like she has the last couple of years? That may be something that she would do. We want to see her proposal.
Okay. Well, obviously I keep hearing about this new normal that's going to occur after this crisis, subsides somewhat. And I don't know about you, but it certainly bothers me somewhat to be thinking about some new normal that might be the case out there, especially with the fact that these viruses seem to pop up every couple of years, but yet we've taken a different track, certainly with this one, where we've shut down the entire economy, and we've never acted this way before. So Is this going to be the new normal? Do you feel that way? And just trying to understand what you're seeing or what you're hearing.
Well, I think right now we're in the middle of it. I know for me, even if you watch a movie and it has people all crowded together in a bar or watching a sports game, you kind of long for those days, but you kind of think that's a little different. It's the way we think now. I think over time things will get back to normal. I think anytime you're practicing good hygiene, and that's always a good thing, regardless of what's going on. But we do have to, our bodies were built to catch things and build up immune systems, and that's how this is how we survive. And you hear the term herd mentality. Well, it's a real thing. Lots of times you'll hear that kids that go to preschool have a much better immune system than kids that don't. There's a reason for that. They're exposed to different things. Now this one, obviously it took folks who took a little different path. There's a lot of concern that our hospitals will be overwhelmed, and then you thinking you're going to have not enough ventilators, not enough protection equipment. But those days are past. I mean, the modeling we show now, our hospitals are able to handle some of these things. It doesn't mean we still shouldn't. People who are sick shouldn't stay home, or if you're elderly or you're very susceptible, that's your decision to stay home. But the rest, folks that can get out and be productive, continue to practice a good social but good hygiene and being courteous to your neighbors.
The other thing that, looking through this particular order that really bothered me again was there seems to be a big focus on winners and losers, much like the essential and non-essential business owners and the businesses from the previous executors. It now looks like we have the dregs of society of businesses, which includes hair salons, nail salons, tanning salons, movie theaters, fitness centers, and they all have to stay shut while we have dentists and chiropractors that get to open up. Bars have to remain shut, but if they happen to serve or have more than 70% of their tickets in food and be classified as a restaurant, then they can be open. Obviously there's guidelines around that, but the bars absolutely are shut. So what sense are we to make of all this?
Well, I think we mentioned it earlier. Just because a bureaucrat says you're not essential doesn't mean that you aren't, your workers aren't. And there is some pickers, winner loser. I've heard from folks tonight that they already had their appointments for their hair salon or their barber next week, and now what are they going to do? I've heard from a few folks that do own and also own memberships to health clubs, and they have the procedures in place where they're going to have the spacing and every other unit is going to be used, and the sanitizing and the misters, and they're not given the opportunity to prove that they can open safely. So we're still hoping for that. But that was the thing that really bothers us about the church order. There was a double standard. You can have a group of folks go out Sunday afternoon for an ice cream parlor, but in that same group went to church, they can go to jail for up to a year and have a $2,500 fine. That's something we can't stand for. We're kind of seeing the same type of things, but again, if the law is enforced, executive order is enforced, it's a Class A misdemeanor, which is could be jail time of up to a year and a $2,500 fine.
Yeah, and we've already had some lawyers in our particular group that said they're willing to represent anybody that does get fined.
And
so we got an interesting case coming, obviously, with this extension of her orders.
And I do think that will be challenged if she has the authority to even do this in the first place, May 1st, the date you referenced.
Sure. And there's been another big problem that we've been trying to get addressed, and it's with transparency when it comes to the numbers coming out of the governor's administration, especially when we're trying to really hard to obtain the statewide recovery numbers. And we keep hearing the active cases, and we all know that there's a lot of folks that recovered from this disease, but yet we're not seeing statewide numbers. We see other states posting them daily, and we see most of the county health departments' websites, and they're actually reporting them. But we can't seem to get those numbers from Governor Kelly. I've heard her mention that counties are not reporting these numbers to the state, which certainly is the case with Johnson County. But I wanted to know your thoughts on that particular little piece and how we might proceed to get her to be a little bit more transparent, especially with the recovery numbers.
I think that's another thing that folks have to continue to advocate for. And you have a lot of reps that are doing a good job, even on social media, saying, why can't we have this information? Um, when you see that number tick up every day of cases of people that have the virus, well, you think it would be an offset for the folks who are healthy. Same thing with how hospitalizations. I think we should be able to see what our total hospitalization is out there, how many beds are empty, how many extra ventilators we have. And as soon as somebody checks out, we should be able to know those kind of things. If you're going to use those to continue, that's the frustration I think we have. Obviously, a lot of frustrations with this new order. But the one that we thought we were going to get and one we really pushed for was something that had some metrics behind it with data. And so even if you didn't agree with an order, you're a Kansan. Like, I know what can I strive for so I can open? And I have a feeling of hope. And so we're still going to push for that. That you say, what do I need to do as a salon to open up? Is it, how can I, if I own that restaurant and I want to be able to have some kind of dine-in service, what is it that I can do outside of the legal system, which I think is still a good possibility for a lot of folks. Obviously, we're still weighing what we can do at the legislature. Again, if we can come back, we were able to be successful. Being what we just saw, especially tonight, the governor can just reissue another one. Then the very next day, change a couple words. And so those are things we are weighing.
Well, and I keep diving back into this EO, and I see another glaring problem. We have counties that are they're actually being allowed to be more restrictive than her order stipulates, and I know that could be a problem in certain instances where we have some overzealous local officials in some cases, and then in other cases where they haven't had a single case yet, right? Those counties are still under restriction where they can't have any of those businesses open. That's a very glaring problem in my mind. What are your thoughts around that simple point? Where she's trying to take a blanket. She's I'll kind of reframe it. So she's always tried to come at this as kind of a blanket type situation for the entire state, where we have a lot of our state that obviously is rural and know how to social distance just by everyday life. And I think we have a governor in a lot of cases that doesn't get rural Kansas. So I just kind of want you to maybe comment on what on that statement.
Yeah, it is confusing. Early on, a lot of counties are doing things, and some are very restrictive. There were a few businesses, manufacturing things that the county said you couldn't open, and in fact, some worked for the governor to have a statewide just to bring some of those regulations down. This goes the exact opposite. This goes back to, we have, it's a patchwork across the state now, and almost a passing the buck doesn't stop here, it's going to go to someone else approach. And so it is a balance. I mean, I don't think the restrictions, and at least early on, the restrictions in Johnson County should have been the ones same in Meade County. Based on 0 cases and hundreds of cases. But we're past that now. Now it's like, what are we doing to allow businesses to reopen? And but it is a different direction than what the governor took early. I remember some of our schools were closing, some weren't. And then she came out and closed them all. It was for unification. We had counties that were being more restrictive, some weren't doing anything, so she came with a uniform. Now, as we're trying to wind this thing down, she goes back to the patchwork approach.
Yeah. So obviously frustration, certainly in our group, the Open Up Kansas group, and many in the Open Up Kansas movement are business owners themselves and individual contractors that employ many folks across the state of Kansas. What would you like to tell those hardworking Kansas in this group? What about the whole debacle? Anything that hasn't been out there in the press? Obviously, one thing is sure is the press isn't reporting both sides of this on an equal basis. And the stay home thing is very prevalent in the media, and they try to preach it to us almost. So we hear it all the time. But we got a group of folks that are dedicated to opening up Kansas. Is there anything you wanted to talk to them about?
You give Kansas the goal, you give a metric to a matrix, we're going to achieve it. Just keep the faith. Keep working, keep advocating. Your presence on social media, is important. Writing letters to the editor, your phone calls on that approach, and also just bring the common sense approach to, hey, I can do this safely. Here's my plan. And I tell you, you mentioned the fact that it's going to the counties. It's to the point where you need to be talking to your local county officials, talk to your county commissions, and say, hey, when you do the opportunity, this is what we're looking for. Because if it does get pushed there, hopefully folks have a better relationship with their county commissioners than they may have with the governor.
Absolutely. And I do appreciate you joining us tonight, Mr. Speaker. And I really do appreciate all the hard work, and thank you for your service and dedication to the state of Kansas.
Well, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Now, I was going to say, Davey, thank you for all you're doing and this group's doing. It means a lot to us. Again, the media not always is reporting the side of the groups that really do want to get back to work. So we do appreciate your efforts, and it means a lot to all of us.
You bet. Thanks again for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Good night.
Yep, we'll see you. All right, guys, that's Speaker Ryckman, and coming to you almost live. Of course, I had to record this tonight due to some technical difficulties on both of our ends, the speakers and mine. And so I'm going to post this right away and make sure it gets up into our group so everybody can get it. So again, Dave Schneider here with Open Up Kansas. Appreciate all your hard work. As the speaker said, we need to make sure that we continue that activism and push the initiative into the local level as well as the state legislative level. So again, Dave Schneider here, signing off. We'll see y'all.